Good morning, dear student. I am Shivaji Ramagudaji, Assistant Professor of English, Government Postgrad College, Kittur. Program BA, Optional English, 3rd semester, Rani Channamma University, Belagavi, Session 6. Dear student, in the previous class, we have already learnt about the various poems of Romantic age. Now in this class, I will discuss one of the most important romantic poet, that is P.B. Shelley's the most famous poem. I think you all guess his most famous poem is Ode to the West Wind. Ode to the West Wind. So before start to the poem, I will give you the brief introduction about the Shelley. Who is Shelley? Shelley is born in 1792, Horsham in Sussex. So he is considered one of the most famous romantic poet. So he lives only a short period, but in that short period he has given a number of poems which is immortal in English literature in the period of Romantic. So he was educated in Eton and University of Oxford. His most well-known works are The Spirits of Solitude, published in 1816, The Cenci, published in 1819, and The Witches of Atlas, 1820. The romantic criticism he has wrote The Defense of Poetry in 1821, and he was passed. Unfortunately, we have lost him in 8 July 1822 in Italy. So this is a brief introduction about the P.B. Shelley, and his full name is Percy Bysshe Shelley. Percy Bysshe Shelley. So dear student, before start to this poem, I want to give a brief introduction about ode. What is ode? In a literary genre, we have seen a number of genre in poetry, that is ballad, sonnet, elegy, but this poem is considered as a ode. Then what is ode? An ode is a lyric poem. It is lyric poem, typically one in the form of an address to a particular subject or written in varied or irregular meter. It is written in irregular meter. Actually, ode was a classical poem of a kind originally meant to be sung. So it is originally meant to be a sung, and it is a lyric poem. And Tennyson's lyric poem Ode on the Death of the Duke of Wellington, and Keats' Ode on a Nightingale. You have already learned this poem. So here the Ode to the West Wind is one of the finest example of P.B. Shelley. So the themes of Ode to the West Wind. The first most important theme is death and rebirth. Death and rebirth. Throughout Ode to the West Wind, the speaker describes the west wind as a powerful and destructive force. It is a destructive and powerful force. So wind he has described as a powerful and destructive force. It drives away the summer and brings instead winter, storm, chaos, and even death too. Yet the speaker celebrates the west wind and welcomes the destruction that it causes because it leads to renewal and rebirth. He has given the importance, the old and the new, the rebirth, the renewal in this poem. So the first most important theme is death and rebirth. Poetry and rebirth. Throughout the Ode to the West Wind, the speaker praises and celebrates the west wind's power. It is a destructive, chaotic, and yet such destruction is necessary for rebirth and renewal. Indeed, the speaker so admires the wind that he wants to absorb the west wind power into his poetry. In his poetry. So Ode to the West Wind. um, Parsi by Shelley. Here the critical appreciation of the poem I have to explain through this PPT. So before going to the poem, so this poem he has given the inspiration, where he has taken the inspiration to present this poem or to write this poem. So Ode to the West Wind was composed in 1819. It was composed in 1819 when Shelley was living in Florence. It was conceived on a day while the poet was out in the forest and skirts and around near Florence. The occasion was sunset. There began heavy autumnal rains, followed by a violent tempest of hail and rain, attended by magnificent thunder and lightning. It was this storm that inspired the poet to compose the great ode, which combines lyrical breadth with the lyrical intensity unsurprised in English song. So it is considered one of the most and the best important lyric poem, ode poem in the English literature. So the critical appreciation of this poem, the poem is a fine example of Shelley's mythopoetic imagination at a work. Mythopoetic imagination means, dear student, the critique of the prevailing myths. It shapes stories about the past and the sceneries about the future. It is combining about the rebirth, the renewal. First three cantos, the first three cantos of this poem, the wind's effect upon the earth, air and ocean. The first three cantos describe wind's effect on earth, air and ocean. Calls the wind a destroyer and preserver. Who is a destroyer and preserver in this poem? The wind. Wind is considered as a destroyer and preserver in this poem. Destroyer and preserver is the wind. In the second canto, in the second cantos, appearance of a very dark clouds. See, I have given the picture there, the image of the dark clouds. Here the dark cloud will appear. The appearance of the dark clouds. Clouds are compared to a long-haired messengers. The clouds he has compared a long-haired messengers. Winds bring clouds and clouds bring rains to thunderclaps. Here we can see how the winds brings the clouds and how the clouds brings the rain and thunderclaps. There will be a new beginning. We have seen here a new beginning in the second cantos. The poet calls the wind. In the second cantos, the speaker calls to the wind, dirge of the dying year. Dirge of the dying year means the old one is reshaping for the new one. In the third cantos, the mighty wind was sleeping far away. The mighty means very the strongest wind was sleeping in far away. It was witnessing things. It was witnessing things. Who was witnessing things? The mighty wind was witnessing things. Its dislocation only upset certain foliage beneath the ocean. See here, the dislocation only upset certain foliage beneath to the ocean. The Atlantic makes way for her. The Atlantic makes way for her. The poet asks everyone to listen. In the third cantos, the poet or the speaker requests to ask everyone to listen about the wind. In the fourth canto, the poet is restless. The speaker is restless, craves for the wind's companionships. He craves for the winds of companionships, longs helpless to break away from every bondage. The longs helplessly to break away from the every bondage. This canto is a core of the poem. This canto is a core of the poem. The poet pleading the wind to lift him as a wave, a leap, a cloud. See here in this fourth cantos, he was pleading to the wind, lift him as a wave, as a leap, as a cloud. In the fifth or final cantos, Shelley's cry to merge with the west wind. So he was crying for the merge of the west wind. Like dead leaves, may all dead and rotten elements be driven away from him. Like a dead leaves, may all dead and rotten elements be driven away from him. Last two magnificent lines we find in this poem. That is, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Means here the rebirth, renewal, the new things will occur in the life of the people. Spring seasons is a metaphor for a spring of human consciousness, imagination, liberty or mortality, we can see in this fifth cantos. So this is the poem about, it tells to becomes a personal despondency and the prophetic passion, which are two dominant notes in Shelley's lyrics. It is here that a very child becomes a prophet. It is a marriage of the most executive words to the most executive harmonies. The west wind is a force of nature. The west wind is a force of nature, but it symbolizes the free spirit of man, untamed, proud. Finally, the west wind is a symbol of the law of life itself, which contains creation and destruction. The poem also reveals Shelley's passion for the regeneration of mankind and rebirth of a new world order. He wants the west wind to destroy the old and create a new order and ideas. See here in the final, he has giving the message. He wants the west wind to destroy the old one and create a new order and ideas. Here we find Shelley at his best as a lyricist in this poem. Now, dear student, we have seen about the appreciation of the ode to the west wind. Now, we have to discuss here what is the structure of this poem. The poem is written in 5 stanzas, or that is called as a cantos. The poem is written in 5 stanzas, or it is called as a cantos. So cantos is nothing but it is a narrative poem. So before we can see, the canto is very famous in Dante's Divine Comedy, Spenser's Fairy Queen, Pope's The Rape of the Lock, and Byron's Childe Harold. And now we have referred here the cantos in this poem. It is 5 stanzas in each cantos. First 4 stanzas consist of 3 lines in each cantos. First 4 stanzas consist of 3 lines in each cantos. One couplet at the end of each canto. One couplet we have to find in the end of each cantos. Meter. The meter followed in this poem is iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter. And the rhyme scheme pattern. The rhyme scheme pattern we have find in this poem, terza rima. Terza rima. Then what is the rhyme pattern? The rhyme pattern in this poem is followed A B A, B C B, C D C, D E D, E E. A B A, B C B, C D C, D E D, E E. This is the rhyme pattern we have followed in this poem. The poet has followed this rhyme pattern. So dear student, please keep in your mind So the meter followed in this poem is iambic pentameter, and the rhyme scheme is called as a terza rima, and rhyme pattern is ABA, BCB, CDC, DED and EE. What is the overall impact of Ode to the West Wind? Ode to the West Wind is a lyric. It is a lyric poem. The music swells like the surge of the west wind. Here the music has followed. It gives a surge to the west wind. The dramatic alliteration. Alliteration is a repetition of the word and which gives the meaning in the opening lines. We have seen the opening lines, the dramatic alliteration, wild west wind, wild west wind. See the first letter, it repeated frequently, W, wild west, W, wind, W, W, W. Shelley depthly blends the natural, the personal and the universal in the same poem. He can naturally blends the personal and universal in the same poem. Shelley finished this great poem optimistically, believing in the rise of humanity, means rebirth, revival. So he can believing that at the end of the poem it is a rise of the new humanity. The literary devices in this poem is used. The primary literary trope in the poem is personification. Personification is a personification is a figure of speech which gives a special quality to the inanimate things. A special, for example, the personification he can explain in this poem. Shelley wants readers to consider the wind a living force. Shelley here has given a special reference wind. Wind is a inanimate things, but he has giving a animate futures, that is living force. Here wind is a living force that helps shape the landscape, literally the physical landscape and metamorphically the landscape of human minds and attitudes he can explain in this poem. Shelley uses three major images in the poem. In the whole poem, Shelley has concentrated the three major images in the poem: the wave, the leap and the cloud. The wave, the leap and the cloud, to demonstrate the ways in which the west wind treats the elements to the physical landscape. One of the most striking images in the poem is used in the fourth stanza to describe the poet's present plight. I fall upon the thrones of life, I bleed. See here, dear student, this line, I fall upon the thrones of life, I bleed, means here Shelley is prepared to get himself transformed into a dead leaf. I fall upon the thrones of life, I bleed, means Shelley is prepared to get himself transferred into a dead leaf, a cloud or a wave, so that it may be lifted by the west wind. It should be lifted by the west wind and thus share its vitality. So here in the fourth stanza, Shelley imagination which roaming over the whole earth, the sky and the ocean, closely following the movement of the west wind over the three rains. The most memorable line of the poem is, if winter comes, can spring be far behind. See the what imaginative lines he have written. If winter comes, can spring be far behind, means according to Shelley, there is always hope of mankind. There is always hope of mankind. Whatever sufferings and hardships humanity may have to undergone, ultimately this dark period will end. He's saying that ultimately the dark period will end and the golden age or the new era will be start. The era of peace, prosperity and plenty must be down just in the nature. When in the atom the rotten things are destroyed. The rotten things are destroyed. The seeds for the future, but the seeds for the future grow are also sown. In the same manner, even during the most depressing periods of human history, seeds of regeneration are also sown, which will blossom forth to some future date. So here he can concentrate about the renewal, the revival, which can give hope to the new future new brings. So these lines he can end the poem of the ode to the west wind. That is a strong lines he has given at the end of the poem. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? It is a hope for the mankind. So dear student, in this class we have discussed about one of the most important romantic poet of Shelley's ode to the west wind. Now I want to see how much you have understand this poem. I will ask some multiple choice questions. You must be ready to answer these questions. So the first question is, Shelley calls the wind. What did Shelley calls the wind? Destroyer, preserver, both A and B, none of the above. And obviously the answer is he can call to the wind, that is destroyer and preserver. So the answer is both A and B. Second question, clouds are compared to. The clouds he has referred in the poem, he has compared these clouds to short thick hair, long hair, short haired messengers, long haired messengers. The answer is D, long haired messengers. Third question is, dash was sleeping far away. Dash was sleeping far away. Poet or the speaker, Atlantic Ocean, mighty wind and mountains. Here the answer is a mighty wind was sleeping far away. Fourth question, who makes way for her? In bracket I have given the wind. Who makes a way for her? Wind. Mountains, river, Atlantic Ocean, wind itself, and the answer is C, Atlantic Ocean. The poet pleading dash to lift him. The poet pleading dash to lift him. The Atlantic Ocean, the worst wind, the wild wind and the cool bridge, and the answer is the wild wind. The poet pleading the wild wind to lift him. If winter comes, complete the line. Can spring be far ahead? Can autumn be far ahead? Can spring be far behind? Can autumn be far behind? And obviously the answer is, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? First four stanzas consist of 3 lines in each cantos. Literally, 3-line stanza is called as couplets, triplets, sextets and octaves. In the options it should be shown that triplets. The answer is triplet. 3 means 3. Wild west wind. Wild west wind. The literary device we find in this line is oxymoron, antithesis, alliteration and simile. The answer is alliteration. Ninth one, Shelley uses three major images in the poem, which are, he has used in this poem the three major images: wind, ocean and the nature; wind, mountain and the nature; the wave, the leap and the cloud; D, the wave, the leap and the ocean. And the answer is C, the wave, the leap and the cloud. Rhyming pattern used in the poem is, which is the rhyming pattern used in this poem? First option, ABA, BCB, CDC, DED, EE; ABBA, BCCB, CDDC, EE; ABA, BAB, CDC, DCD, EE; and D1, ABAB, BCBC, CDCD, EE. And the answer is C1. Sorry, answer 1, A1, ABA, BCB, CDC, DED, EE. So dear student, in this class we have learnt about the P.B. Shelley's most important poem, Ode to the West Wind. Thank you.